Friends, we've created a very holistic approach. How do you select, a particular industry or a brand, and how do we go about it? And this is something that has come as a part of our own experience of working with a lot of investors and, brands on one side, on the other side. So these are four assessment tools, friends, which we advise everybody to consider before they want to start a business, which starts with, your own self-assessment. Second is the industry that you want to select. And that's again a question which we get more often. What is the sunrise industry? What do you think is right for us? Third is the market that you want to open the business in. Fourth is the peer. Peer is the competition assessment. If you have chosen a brand, which is the other competition which is present. And lastly is the assessment of the brand that you have selected. So under these 5 assessment tools, we have created a 25-point checklist, which makes, our job and your job even more easy. Even if you're exploring something, it becomes easy for you to even tick mark and say, what do I have to actually evaluate under these, 5 assessment tools? So these 25-point, checklist, is something which if you have a score of say 20 under these 25 points, then the opportunity that you have selected is great. So if you score anything between 15 to 20, then the opportunity is again decent enough. But if your overall score is less than 15, then we do not advise you to maybe select that opportunity and maybe go back and rework. And I'll brief you friends on these all these 25 points. So you can see on the extreme left we have created a point structure, so from excellent, good to not advisable. And this is something which is very, very inclusive. And I'll start with maybe the self-assessment, which I've always assumed is the most important aspect for anybody. Before you want to start anything, you have to start assessing, what entrepreneurship means to you. And when I say self-assessment, you need to understand your life goals and business goals. It is a phase where you have to discover yourself, find out, what you're really cut out for, and that's where the journey begins. Now, this further goes on to understand what my financial goals are, right? So when I say financial goals, unless I know what I want to achieve in my life, I will never be able to align my business goals along with it. Now, when it comes to business and also maybe the goals that we want to achieve in life, we have to align that with the financial goals that we want to achieve. So when I say financial goals, typically there are 3 things, which you should take into consideration. And I call that as TRR. And when I say TRR, T stands for timeline, R stands for risk, and the other R stands for return. So timeline means the timeline to achieve the financial goal. You can have a midterm, a long term, or maybe, I would say a short term financial goal. And maybe not all opportunities would give you, that kind of a return, right? So, or maybe a timeline in which you want to. Some of you might want to even diversify your investments or put in different asset classes. So first and foremost, timeline for you to achieve financial goal is something which is paramount, very important. Second is the return that you're expecting, right? So what return did you expect from the investment? And today I was speaking to one investor, intelligent guy. He said, I understand, if I look at small investment, because sometimes, I get to hear a lot of investors who say, I want something which is very, very, high on returns. I don't want to take any kind of risk on the business. And this is the money I want to earn. But they would have no, homework done on what businesses can give you, what kind of returns one. And the return can be given, based on the industry that you're in, based on the opportunity that you are actually, putting your investments in. So which is a big homework, which I would advise everybody to do before even, jumping the gun and deciding ki mere ko ye return chahiye or ye mere ko investment karna hai. So timeline, like I said, is the first thing. Second is what return I expect on the business. And third is what risk I'm willing to take. Now, all these 3 are actually interrelated. So like I mentioned, if you as an investor want to invest in any asset class, and different asset classes are categorized fundamentally into 3 goals, right? So when I say, if I want to make an investment, my first thought would be, oh, I want my investments to be very safe, right? I don't want to take risk. Second thought could be, oh, I want to have some income generated out of the investment I do, which can be nominal, moderate income, which I can generate. Third is a mindset of growth, right? I want to have maybe a high growth return on the investment I do. Now, similarly, when I say safety as my goal, I'm also telling that I'm looking at something which is not risky, right? So any business that you look at, safety would come with a low risk, but equally, I would say low returns. Something which comes with a moderate risk will also have moderate returns coming in. A growth-centric business would come with higher risk and higher returns. That is the only equation, that can happen. There is no other equation, and I'll give an example. I don't know how many of you actually are very consistent in following opportunities. 3 days back, I happened to see a big ad in Economic Times, and this was a half-page ad given by a company. And frankly, I don't know how many people have already applied for that particular opportunity, but it looked like a complete scam, right? So it said, just invest 1 lakh rupees and start earning 50,000 rupees every month. In my own experience of, more than 2 decades now, I have never come across an opportunity where you can invest 1 lakh rupees and start earning 50,000 rupees. But a lot of, I would say, gullible investors sometimes, fall prey to advertisements like these. So I would really request you to be extremely wary when you make that investment, and as much as information that you want to seek, our teams are more than happy to even extend that information across. And sometime back, I even happened to speak to somebody and they said, I invested in a KFC franchisee, but it was a fluke, and there was a company that even created the website of the company and took the money online, but the poor investor had no clue. The company did not sub-franchise. So sometimes we don't go all out, we don't do our due diligence. So that's very, very important, part of our business process, and our teams actually guide you on every stage of the process. The third thing, which is very important, is the capital that you want to invest in the business. And we advise people, investors, not to leverage too much and maybe invest to an extent where you don't have to raise too much of capital, or maybe take a soft loan, maybe, so minimum investment that you should have to run a business you want to put money is minimum of 50% that you should consider. Third is the time involvement, and time involvement, I would say, is one of the most important criteria when we talk about franchising as a business, because franchising is an active business. It is not a passive investment, which I make maybe in a stock or a property, which I would say, give its return over a period of time. But it's a business which requires your time, and especially most of the business opportunities, which I say are under 50, 60 lakhs, are opportunities which require more of time and less of anything else, right? So time involvement is something which all the companies who are into franchising would look at from a partner. Having said that, the number of hours can be different based on the category, industry, or maybe I would say the stage of the business that you are in, and that absolutely is something which is very, very subjective. And lastly is your fallback plan, which means that you should have maybe, your risk kind of distributed. And because any business takes time to reach an optimum level, 6 months, 7 months, and maybe, the first cycle, the first full year. So at any given point in time, I would say if you're doing something, you have a business, don't shut that down. Always have a fallback plan to go back to. Second is the industry assessment. And this is something which is very important, because we need to understand the critical factors that help us to determine, a company's success within the industry. How overall industry is attractive, which can include things like how big the opportunity is in the very first place. Kitni badi opportunity hai, how many buyers are there? Kitni badi demand hai uski? Is it already overcrowded? Do we have many players doing the same thing? Is it a business which is already commoditized, right? And when a business is commoditized, then obviously your earning is not so much, or margins are not so great. Or you think it is a business where I, as an investor, can have the first mover advantage. I was speaking to somebody today, and this gentleman was looking at something, and apparently he was from a city where I said, I have a great opportunity, because it was something related to the current business he was doing. And I said, this company is looking at entering your market. So you might have a first mover advantage where you can even take maybe the entire city rights. So maybe then opportunity can be seen like that. Second, which I would say is very important, is, we need to understand what is the prospect of that opportunity. Sometimes we look at very short-term horizon. When we look at any investment, and especially when we talk about business, our thinking, requirement should be for a minimum horizon of 4 to 5 years. And we have to look at opportunities which would remain relevant in the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. So today, when I say I want to open a preschool or a K-12 school, I need to ask myself, are children going to go to school in the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? If I'm looking at an opportunity, to think people are going to consume that product in the manner they're doing in the next 10 or 15 years. So if the answer is yes, that the opportunity, that industry or the category is good to go. Never look at the next 6 months, 8 months, 10 months. Always look at, the future fitness of that opportunity. Third is the demand and supply, which is very, very important. And there could be a case where we already have existing companies, brands, maybe fulfilling that demand, right? So it does not mean that if the demand is being fulfilled, I don't have an opportunity of bringing that particular opportunity or a brand in that market. There could also be a gap. Now, this gap can be in the level of service. It could be in the level of pricing. It could be in the level of solution, or the product itself is something which can be differentiator. So understand that. And lastly, is the innovation. Always look at companies which are, always innovating, companies which are relevant to the end consumer. Only these companies are companies which are going to be future fit. How many organizations or brands, perhaps, you would come and say these companies are running for nearly 90 years and today also they're relevant. I'm sure you will not have many names or brands to come to your mind, very few of them, right? So that's very important for sustainability of the business. Third is your market assessment. Every market is unique, different. You need to understand first and foremost what stage is that particular business in. So startup stage pe hai, growth stage pe hai. Are they already started to create clusters? They have become big in one market, going in another market. So that understanding is very, very important when you look at your own market for that particular brand. And similarly, maybe the stage of that industry also, kitni badi hai, for example, EdTech or maybe electric vehicle. So all these are very important when you consider your market for that particular industry or for that particular brand, and followed by even, I would say, regulations, because regulations, drug license, liquor license, electric vehicle, all these are both state subject and center subject. So it is important what your state guidelines talk about these industries. You must be able to understand, interpret what that means for you. And then is the real estate, which is very important because real estate is one important criteria for maybe a success or a failure of a business. One rule that we give advice to our investors is always look at the locations where your immediate competition is present. And from these locations, maybe your competition is present maybe in maybe 6 markets in your city. And out of these 6 maybe locations in the city, understand which are the 2 or 3 locations where they're doing their top performance. So the locations which are doing the top performance are definitely a good bet, and your probability of success of that particular venture in that location would be much higher than choosing any other location. Right. And then we come to competition assessment, which is again very important. We never advise anyone to look at just one opportunity and go blindly investing in that opportunity, but also look at which is the competition which is present maybe at the national level, regional level, and maybe the closest 2 or 3 companies that you feel are very close to what I'm looking at. Understand their offering, understand if there's a competitive edge I have. It could be, again, I said, product, is there a solution which they're bringing in? Is there a price advantage which I have? Is there technology advantage which I have? So all that is something which you have to understand. And equally, I would say the penetration and performance of the company. And these two are 2 different aspects. So when I say penetration, maybe the brand has a great penetration, but not all the outlets might be performing well, right? So understand the penetration and performance equally when we look at competition. And the offering, which I did talk about, a while back. And lastly is the assessment of the company itself. So finally, after doing all that, if you've narrowed down on a brand, what is that you must really also consider before you actually sign on the dotted line? So which includes a lot of things which we have put here, which includes maybe the people who are behind, the founders, maybe their past performance of the company, how they have standardized their manuals to make it I would say more efficient for a franchise partner to run and operate. So margins, when I say margins would be, apple to apple. Never compare margins, apple to orange, right? So even in the same industry, I would say different categories would have different margin structure. So all this is important when you look at a brand. But 2 or 3 tips, which I want to give everybody when you look at and you want to maybe qualify a company as a partner, you want to go ahead. First and foremost, understand and maybe discuss with the company. And if this is a company which is already running their own centers, or I would say even their franchise centers, understand if they have, operating a multi-unit franchisee. So many companies I work with very closely, and some of them are old in the industry. Some of them have recently started franchising. Many of them, there's a brand which we would be launching very soon, and they have never been into franchising, but they've already started to speak, and there are many people who have already committed to take certain number of units in a location. So if a company has a single partner operating multiple locations, it also gives you a heads up on, I would say, credibility and the support structure of the company. Second, even ask the franchisor if they have been running, what is the average success rate of a franchisee in their system. If my average tenure with a company is say 5 years, how many of them actually complete that tenure and renew further? So while if there's a mild attrition, say, or maybe uh, attrition of say 25 odd percent, which is very great. That's decent enough. That's natural. But if it is beyond say 30, 40, or maybe say 50% of people are actually moving out before even completing the terms. So friends, thank you for being with us, and I wish you all a very great day ahead. Thank you.